Well, hello, Smiley. It's good to be back here in the saddle after a little bit of time off, both of us traveling. And let's see here. I mean, you were off to Florida for a little bit to play some golf down there, and then up at the U.S. Open. I was up in Pennsylvania. My wife got inducted into her high school Hall of Fame. I was playing a little golf up there. And while we were gone, we had the Team Europe Ryder Cup picks. Luke Donald made his captain's picks. We got a lot to get to there. We have some Walker Cup to get to. We have, of course, the college football weekend that I'm very much looking forward to discussing. You maybe not so much, but how you been, man? How are all the trips? You look great despite maybe being a little exhausted. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty worn out. I'm not gonna lie. In September, it's gonna continue to be busy. Going to Napa next week for
This is how tired you are.
first. I guess it's the first PGA Tour event of the year. I guess is that the first, or was it just like these asterisk events that fit in?
It's like weird schedule purgatory. It's not really part of last year and it's not really part of next year. It's just something in between.
I know, and it's going to be kind of confusing to be on the call for it because you don't really know what the expectations are of how the players are going to play because they're just playing for money and for exemptions and so really it's like, do you play differently? Do you have a different strategy? I got to kind of figure all this stuff out before I get to Napa next week, but
well, I mean, but it's going to be the thing about it that I think will be interesting is it kind of gives us a lens into like what meaning is assigned to the FedEx Fall, because it is 51 through 125 that are playing for next 10 exemption into the first wave of signature events this next season.
Yep, that's
so
right.
There's that. And then, of course, there are things we couldn't have expected that give it meaning, the biggest one being Justin Thomas hoping to play himself into some form for the Ryder Cup. So there's some interesting stuff there, I think.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point on the next 10 thing. Like that's not even you. Every time you remind me of that, I've totally forgotten about it because it's just not fresh to me. I haven't seen it yet, but you're right. I think that's going to be what the guys are playing for. It's just better to get into some better events next year. So yeah, that'll be definitely something. And then obviously winning, you get some extra starts, but yeah, I think the whole conversation and topics around Napa next week is totally going to be about JT and how he plays and what type of form he's in. I saw the pool noodle videos this weekend.
I was going to ask you about that. He had a good little post there. He was hanging out with like Eric Church. He was going fishing and he's working with some pool noodles. I mean,
there's never a bad time at Troubadour. So
I don't know much about it, but neither have I ever been to Nashville. I mean, it sounds like it's an amazing place, but
it's awesome.
Have you talked to JT at all about where? I mean, it seems like he's in a good headspace, and we heard from him on that call of the captain's picks with Zach Johnson. What have you heard, if anything, about where he's at in his stage of prep for the Ryder Cup?
Well, he's been playing well, just from what I've seen, just like scores that have been kind of coming across the phone, just in our group text. But I think we've talked about this before. Just the reset that a player gets after a season is the most refreshing thing in the world because really, especially going to play a match play format, he doesn't have to focus as much about score as much about just beating the guy in front of him. And I think a lot of players that have struggled in the past in stroke play or just not been as good. And I could speak to this just from my perspective is that I would show up to match play and then I would almost get lost in just trying to beat the guy in front of me. And I started playing so much better golf. And I don't know if that'll hold true for JT, but I do think that is a trend and a thing for people. Just kind of look at, the start of the year for Sam Burns. Didn't necessarily have, the best, January, February, and spring, and then shows up to the match play and he wins, but really he got better every week, or every day, playing different guys and not focusing so much about golf and just more about just beating the guy in front of him. So I think that will be the best thing for JT, along with like having time to go and work on some things and like really seeing like, okay, where was I off? Because I think the biggest thing for Justin is like, all right, what has Justin been so good at since he's been on the PGA Tour since he's gotten out here? What has he been able to rely on every single week? For the most part, it's always been his iron game. One of the best iron plays I've ever seen. And when he's just kind of mediocre at that, now you have longer looks for birdie. Your superpowers, like we kind of talk about with guys, kind of go away, and everything else just becomes a little bit more average. But I think with Justin, it's like, let's get the iron game back to what exactly who he is, which is he's one of the best, and still have that length in his game. And then from there, he should have some closer putts where he doesn't have to lean so much on having to make longer putts throughout the day. So I think that's kind of my takeaway from JT over the last however long. And I think he's starting to get some confidence.
Yeah, I think that I love the way you frame that when we talk about certain guys and just their superpowers. And it's one thing if a guy who has a certain, or, who maybe it's not as strong a skill set, like Scotty, maybe not putting as much as well as he'd like to on a week-to-week basis, we can kind of come to expect that. And he's shown us that he can still contend even if he's putting poorly. If Scotty shows up and he's not hitting his approach shots anywhere near, the hole or the green, okay, that's a whole different problem. And the results are going to be much, much worse. So for JT, it makes a ton of sense to hear you say, like, the iron game was a superpower and he had sort of been robbed of that in the last few months. And so now he gets some time to kind of reset, regroup. And I really, really hope, because you know how it is in media in this game, if he shows up with a Fortinet and he doesn't blow everybody away, there are going to be a ton of knee-jerk reactions of, oh, Zach shouldn't have taken him. See, we told you should have taken Keegan or Cam Young or whoever else. And it's going to drive me nuts, because it's like, that tournament should not be a referendum on whether or not he's ready to go play a completely different style of competition, match play, to your point, over in Rome, a arena in which he thrives. And I think, we see him this week kind of decompressing a little bit, working on some stuff, at Troubadour. He's going to go out there and Fortnite. He may very well play great. He may boat race the field, and that would be great, because it gives people less sort of ammo to fuel that fire. But I think if he goes there, if he goes to Fortnite and he does not play well initially, or he's still working on some stuff, I still don't think that's a bad thing. It's him taking stuff he's been working on, trying to kind of put into play. And if it takes him 4 days or 2 days to kind of work that out, that's fine. That's expected with the golf swing. I don't know if that's, if you agree with that or disagree with that.
No, I'm with you that he's going to be totally judged. It's pretty hard on what he shoots. If he shoots the first round, he goes out and fires a 1 or 2 over, the world's going to melt. And it doesn't matter. He's on the team. He's showing up, and he's going to be working on the things that he's been working on the last month or so. And when you haven't played in a while, typically, you show up where you hope that you don't have to think about every aspect of your game and that you can just rely on your practice. But there's going to be things that you figure out when you're out there. It's like, okay, I could trust this really well, but I wasn't exactly feeling very comfortable on this shot. So, sometimes you're firing on all cylinders when you show up when you haven't played in a while, but for the most part, it's always like you kind of work your way into the week. And Justin's always been so good at just about hanging around at tournaments. And once he starts to get the groove of the golf course and his game, that's where you shoot that 65 on Saturday and vault up and then just put yourself in contention on the back nine on Sunday. And it'll be cool too to see Max Homa there. He's really, I thought, was trending and really just playing some incredible golf towards the end of the year. I really felt like, he was a guy that was due to win right after all of the FedEx Cup, kind of like you talked about with Victor Hovland. It's like if he just kept playing, he would have won every week.
Yeah.
But Homa, man, I really think he's going to be. I think he's won twice there. Won last year, kind of on that fluke deal. I will say fluke deal, but it seemed a little fluky in the fact that Danny Willett 3 putts, he chips in from nowhere and he wins the golf tournament. But he won back in 2021 as well. So he obviously likes the golf course, and maybe Homa's going to be the guy that's going to be the guy that plays 5 times in Rome and is going to be, the guy that's going to be going up against a John Rahm and a Victor Hovland. Like, is he your ace in the hole? And I think if he goes out and wins a Napa, that's an impression to Zach Johnson, it's like, hey, this guy needs to be playing every single match.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think he was a guy that looked like he was trending kind of end of last year, end of the last calendar year, I should say, but just, beginning of the. I mean, now my head's spinning because I'm trying to compute 3 different seasons. But you know what I mean? That win at Fortinet, then he wins at Torrey Pines this year. Then he contends. He's going right down the stretch with John Rahm at the Genesis. And you're thinking, could this be the year that Max Homa finally wins a major? And I think he himself would tell you he was disappointed with his results in the first 3 majors. He's, tied for 43rd at the Masters, tied 55th at the PGA. Gets cut at the U.S. Open, a place where a lot of people thought he was going to go and have a great chance because that was kind of his local deal. But yeah, end of the year, find some form. He finished tied for 10th at the Open Championship, and so I think that's a great call. It's nice, I think, too. In the same way that JT's going, to the Fortinet to get back in the rhythm of competition and gain some confidence heading into the Ryder Cup. It's nice for Max to go back to a place where he has good memories. He's won a tournament there and just kind of remind himself, hey, like I'm, one of the best players in the world and I can go out and dominate in Rome. I think that's kind of a nice segue to the picks that we missed when we took Monday's episode off. Just reacting to what Luke Donald did on the Team Europe side of things. So just to kind of recap on that front, the qualifiers were Rory McIlroy, Jon Rahm, and Robert McIntyre from the Euro points category. And on the world points side, Rory and Rahm were 1 and 2, but since they'd already qualified on Euro points, the next 3 qualifiers were Victor Hovland, Tyrrell Hatton, and Matt Fitzpatrick. And then Luke Donald's 6 captains picks were Tommy Fleetwood, Sepp Straka, Shane Lowry, Justin Rose, Nikolai Højgaard, and Ludvig Aberg. So just let's start right with your just initial impressions of those picks and what Luke Donald did there.
I think the big controversies over that Meronk pick, Adrian Meronk. I think a lot of people thought he would slide in front of either one of Shane Lowry. I think Ludvig Aberg kind of feel like he played his way onto the team. I think he was a lock. But Højgaard, I think that was a debatable pick with Meronk as well. But definitely a super talented player, young guy that, building for the future. I think that's kind of where this Europe team is right now, especially with the changing of the guard of, the Ian Poulter, Sergio Garcia, Graham McDowell, Lee Westwood. That whole crowd is not going to be, at or involved in Henrik Stenson. They're not going to be at the Ryder Cup. They're not going to be in this team room. So you got a new crop of players that you're going to be having on this European Ryder Cup team. And I really like the team that he picked. And I was kind of reading an article recently, and this was on Golf Week, and Padraig Harrington said, hey, I had high praise for Luke Donald. But the thing that kind of struck me a little bit that made perfect sense was I think Europe is, he said, I think we're back. I think Europe is very strong this year. And he thinks, I believe we're back to the 80s, the 70s, where our top players are actually the best players in the world. And that kind of struck a chord in me. It's like, hey, we've been talking about Rory McIlroy, Jon Rahm, and Victor Hovland. And I think we've been giving a lot of credit to the U.S. side that they're just the depth. But when you talk about the top players and the players that we talk about more often than not, it's this Europe. It's the top of this Europe squad. And I've been super high on Victor Hovland this year, and same with Tyrrell Hatton. And we already know what those other 2 guys can do. And this Ryder Cup's going to be all about the depth. Who shows up in the back end and who's going to be able to, be a complementary piece to this team. Because, this Europe team on paper looks good, but they need some good showings from Matthew Fitzpatrick, from Tyrrell Hatton. Is Shane Lowry going to give you anything? It's all debatable right now. When you look at that U.S. team, you're like, I trust the middle of the lineup more on the U.S. and on the back half with the U.S. than maybe just the inexperience and the okay play for the Europe side at times this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because I think that, well, first of all, I think it's just so interesting how the same dilemmas that we faced on our side almost were mirrored in a different sort of way.
Yeah, Keegan Meronk, right?
I mean, you can. I think you can draw immediate kind of parallels between Adrian Meronk and Keegan Bradley, where Adrian Meronk looked like he'd won at Marco Simone. He had done everything like he felt like he had to do to make this team, especially thinking like, hey, the DP World Tour runs this team. Theoretically, they need to have some representation here. I should be that guy, and getting passed over in favor of Højgaard. That to me was just like, you heard Keegan Bradley less than a week ago talk about how he feels like an outsider on this team. And that was like, just run that back for Adrian Meronk. I think that there are parallels between Højgaard and Burns, of being a guy who's kind of younger with a ton of potential that could pair well with other guys on the team and form a really strong partnership in the years going forward. So even if he's a borderline guy, you're taking, like, I understand you're picking a team to win the Ryder Cup, but at the same time, you're betting in a guy who's playing in his first Ryder Cup and giving some experience for the years going forward. I think that's a huge, huge thing that Luke Donald's done there. And I think the Shane Lowry, Justin Thomas parallels are really interesting, of two guys who are kind of vets and experienced. And, Taylor Zarzour said this on our air on PGA Tour radio. I think it was yesterday. Well, this is at time of taping, so this is maybe a couple of days ago, but, and I thought it was such a smart thing. It's like, people are ripping into Zach Johnson for the Justin Thomas pick. I mean, Shane Lowry had a worse finish to his season and also does not have the Ryder Cup resume that Justin Thomas has. Yet we're not really seeing a ton of uproar there about that pick. So, what's the deal here? It's kind of a double standard. Now, I think in some ways that folds back into your point that you're making about the depth on each team, the relative depth on each team, and that the USA has seemingly more depth on that roster. And so it's a tougher to kind of pick the back end because there's so many good candidates. Whereas on Europe's side, you're like, do I take I'd say the Lowry versus Meronk debate is, not maybe as strong as the Justin Thomas versus Keegan Bradley debate, or the Burns versus Keegan Bradley debate. I will say, though, that on Team Europe's side, until you get to singles, you only have to play 8 guys, right? I mean, the President's Cup's different where you're playing 10 guys. All you need
to play is 8 guys, but I'll caution you on this as well with that, is that this golf course is apparently very, very hilly. So I don't know if they're going to be sending out,
the same guy. That's a really good point.
I think you really need to have that middle and the back part of your lineup play well so that you can have your top guys sit once.
I just think that, to me, it's like, I think we're looking at Ludvig Aberg. Like, I mean, we've talked about this off air, like Jordan Spieth was on this show at the beginning of June. He was talking about, in this context, Scotty Scheffler, but saying that when Jordan in 2013 was picked for the President's Cup at the age of 20. And then the year after, at the age of 21, when he was picked for the Ryder Cup in 2014, that set him up, gave him the experience he needed to go out and win those majors in 2015. Scotty Scheffler, 33rd on the Ryder Cup points list at Whistling Straits, gets picked, beats Jon Rahm in a singles match, goes out next year, wins the Masters and 4 events, and becomes the best player in the world. I think Aberg, we're looking at him as a 11th or 12th guy on the team, but I think next year he could be a top 20 player on the PGA Tour. So I just think there's maybe more depth there than we think there is. And even for guys like Lowry and Rose, who, I mean, Lowry's form's been worse than Rose's, but those are kind of the vets in the room now that the Sergio Garcias and the Ian Poulters are gone. And I think that there's maybe more depth in this team, because the other 3 guys you're talking about are Fleetwood and Straka, which Straka has had an incredible year, and to kind of play his way into East Lake.
Hadn't played in the Ryder Cup, and I think that's where that Meronk pick maybe. If you're taking Aberg, Højgaard, Straka, and Meronk, and then there's somebody else as well that I'm missing, not thinking of, that would add to another rookie on the Ryder Cup team. So that, to me, the pick of keeping Meronk off the team, I think, was more of an experience play. And I thought, looking at it from that perspective, I think was a smart decision.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because I think what you come back to is, you can debate this all you want to, but they are called the captain's picks for a reason. The captain gets to decide what the makeup of the team is. And if you wanted to be on the team, there's a way to do that. You finish in the top 6 on points, or you finish in one of the 2 categories for the European points, and then you're on the team, and no one gets to take you off or debate, whether or not you should be included. So, I mean, I of course feel for guys like Adrian Meronk and Keegan Bradley, but I look at that European team, and I'm like, that is both a really, really good roster for now, and kind of to Patty Harrington's point, going into the future. And it's a team that I'm nervous about as an American. Like, it is not going to be a cakewalk over there.
No, it is not going to be at all. And, I think when we kind of look at these two teams and why that people see that this European team's like, okay, they can totally beat this United States team, where leaving Whistling Straits, we're like, I don't see a path where this European team will be deep enough to beat this strong American team. And as we sit here today and I look at these teams, and the advantage I give still to the United States. And the reason why is because they have pairings. They have comfortable pairings. And when I look at this European Ryder Cup team, I don't think they have the most obvious pairings, as, just from an experience standpoint that we've seen, just a mixed match of guys. Now, can they form some duos that are going to be playing together over the next, 4 or 5 Ryder Cups? Sure. But we just don't know exactly who that is, because we tie Patrick Cantlay and Xander Schauffele at the hip. We tie Jordan and JT at the hip. We tie, whoever else I'm missing on the United States team. It's to me, I think that is a factor as well.
Let me ask you this. Who would you like to see? Like, let's say you're a Team Europe assistant captain, so you're not trying to sabotage these pairings so that the US can win the Ryder Cup. Who would you like to see paired together on that side? Or who do you think could be good for each other in terms of developing a future pairing, or just developing a younger guy who's playing for the first time on that team?
You know what? I'm really interested to see who Jon Rahm will be paired with, because
same.
for the longest time, he's been always paired with Sergio. Yep. And to me, I think he'll be taking more of the Sergio role. So I would expect him to be with someone like a Højgaard or an Aberg, someone that he can kind of take under his wing. And, to me, that makes a lot of sense. For whatever reason, I can't get out of my head that Rory and Tyrrell that they should play together. I just think Tyrrell's putting with Rory's ball striking just seems to match really nicely to me. But I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, those are two interesting ones. I mean, I think that there are the pairings that I want to see. I want to see the Rahm Straka Husky Boys pairing, because that would just absolutely delight me.
That's a good point. We already talked about that.
We talked about those on our Ryder Cup live stream, which is that was the Team USA picks live stream, which is worth checking out on our YouTube right now if you're not already subscribed. But I think I almost would like to see. I think you kind of nailed it with Rahm. I would think the same thing for Rory. Like, I'd love to see like Rory playing with Ludvig. I think, Rory, a lot of people are saying Shane Lowry. That's the kind of, those guys have played together before. Rory's, from Northern Ireland, Shane from Ireland. But I almost think that one it's like you're kind of wasting a veteran on another veteran. Yeah, like I would not be shocked, even though they're kind of both back half of the roster guys. Like, if Lowry and Rose are there for experience, I could see one of those guys playing with a Højgaard or an Aberg, just to kind of be a calming veteran presence. Maybe in an afternoon session where some of the guys playing the morning session are a little kind of tired out. I'm curious to see who Vic plays with. I think he'll play with Tommy
Fleetwood. I think he'll play with Tommy. He played with Tommy. He played with Tommy at Whistling Straits, and I think those two will just be knocking down flag sticks and
just 4.5 hours of just flushing.
I think those two guys will play together. It makes too much sense. They've played together before. It seems like an obvious pairing. And I think what people forget about too often about the Whistling Straits Ryder Cup, we remember that USA absolutely dominated. We remember Jon Rahm losing in the singles match to Scotty Scheffler 4-3, but we don't remember the 3.5 points that Jon Rahm earned before that. He was the best player at the Ryder Cup by far. Like, nobody could beat Jon Rahm. Didn't matter what United States team went up against Jon Rahm. Whoever was on his team, he was pulling them through. So I think you can't forget how good Jon Rahm is in these Ryder Cups. He took on Tiger Woods as a very young player in the singles format, and took him down. And that's the type of player and the type of fire that this cat can play with. He is 100% the leader of that team. Now, Rory is definitely the guy who's been there the most, but I look to Jon Rahm to be your ultimate closer, the guy that you send out first, and just knowing like, all right, if you go beat Jon Rahm, good, shake the person's hand and say good work, because He's the guy that has proven it in the Ryder Cups to me time after time. Now, who the heck is he going to get paired with? Does it matter? I don't know. But it wasn't exactly firing on all cylinders at the end of the year. But like we talked about with match play, it doesn't matter. It wakes up a beast in guys, and they just go play golf.
There's an interesting point in there. So much of this past tour season, we've seen Rory become the de facto player spokesperson for the tour, right?
Yes.
Like, the leader in a lot of ways of, this is, and I think probably the majority of that we've seen from the position of defending the tour against Liv. And now it's a very unique, complex scenario where the tour's negotiating with the PAF to potentially, join business interests, whatever that may look like in the future. And I know that, I think probably a lot of people do agree with Rory's standpoint, but there are probably some that wonder, on some of the rhetoric, if we could have taken a different tact because of where we ended up. And that's by no fault of Rory's, right? And then you have a guy like Rahm, who is also a strong spokesperson for the PGA Tour, but has strong relationships with guys who have moved to live, like Phil Mickelson from the Arizona State connection, like Sergio, the Spain connection. What do you think that Team Europe, that sort of team room's like when you have got two guys that are strong presences, strong leaders? Like, is there any sort of, if you have two quarterbacks, you have none situation going on there where
no? I think the big issue currently I see with this Europe team is the four guys I named earlier, five guys who were stalwarts for the European Ryder Cup team. The amount of experience those players and assistant captains, future captains all had in those playing past Ryder Cups and really changing the way the United States had to look at the Ryder Cup is because of those guys who were at Liv who are no longer a part of this. We're talking about Henrik Stenson. We're talking about Paul Casey. We're talking about Graham McDowell. We're talking Sergio Garcia, Lee Westwood. I mean, the list goes on of players. Ian Poulter. Thank you. And I think not having that in the team room, to me, that's a missing piece to this European team where you talk about the team room of who's going to be the leader. And from the player side, we kind of expect Jon Rahm, Rory McIlroy to kind of be the guys that speak up a little bit more. But Luke Donald he's a very reserved guy. He's a very, I wouldn't say by the book, but he's not very outspoken. He's somebody that is a more of a deep thinker, someone that's, relies on strategy. And that's how he became number one in the world is he knew how to play his game. He wasn't a guy that was, having crazy press conferences. This is a guy that just was really good at what he did. And I think a guy like Padraig Harrington, who will be around, I assume, I'm not sure exactly who all. I need to look into that. Who the assistant captains is
surprisingly not an assistant captain.
Wow.
It's both of the Molinari brothers.
Mm-hmm. One of them gives them really good data because Eduardo works with a lot of players.
I think Matt Fitzpatrick, among others. I believe I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I could be wrong, but I think it's Thomas Bjorn, Nicholas Kolsarts, and Jose Maria Olafable, I think, are the five.
It's so like, to me,
it's an interesting makeup.
Like when you break down football games and you look at team, you look at coaches, you look at environment. So like environment, you obviously give the check mark to the European team having the home crowd. Coaches, 100%, you got to go to the US side just with, they have some continuity with all the, typically it's the same guys every year that are a part of the assistant captains.
Well, that's the thing that's like, you want to critique the boys club, people just up in arms about the boys club. I mean, you tell me that's no disrespect to the Team Europe guys, but that's actually, as you're saying it, I think it's such a good point of, I'm looking at this and I'm like, wow, you got two strong presences in Rahm and McIlroy, and who's going to be the leader in that room? It's almost like, well, dude, there's this huge vacuum here now because all these strong voices left, and you maybe don't have strong presences on that, the captain, the assistant captain staff. So you're going to need those voices. Whereas you look on the U.S. side and you have, Steve Stricker, who led them to the last win at Whistling Straits. You've got Freddie Couples, you've got Davis Love, you've got Stuart Sink, you've got Jim Furyk. I mean, and you have, of course, the captain, Zach Johnson. So, man, that is that's an interesting one to think about, just in terms of what those team talks look like. And of course, we're going to watch the parts where they're playing on the course, but what happens in the in between, trying to kind of manage expectations and how you're going to go out and win this thing.
Well, and I think too, the biggest thing for the European team is that they don't know what type of lineups they're going to be creating, where I feel like the US, it's going to be a little bit easier for the guys to create it because most of them are friends, like a lot of people have talked about. So I think many of the players can play with each other, but the European team. So I think what most likely happens with these captains is that they script out, if everything goes according to plan and we tie every single match all the way until singles, this is what our lineup would look like. And that's what it looks like until you go down 3-1 or you go down 6-2.
Famous Mike Tyson quote. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Exactly. And I think that's this European team. If that happens to them, where do the captains go as far as, all right, are we just throwing out our bottom four and we just riding what we got? Because that to me would be an easy way to really struggle in singles play for guys not being fresh, because we talked about this golf course, how hilly it is, how much emotion and the like I say physicality, like we're playing football, but it's as much of a physical and mental test over 3 days. The President's Cup is 4 days. Ryder Cup is 36 whole days. Like it's a grueling deal. Like it's the Ryder Cup. I think people think about of just we get to singles play, but we forget the guys play 36 holes on Friday and Saturday. So it's going to be who gets punched in the mouth first. If it's the European team that punches the United States, I feel like their game plan is probably going to stay relatively the same on who they're going to send out based on who wins or loses. But does the European team start changing their lineups to where it's like, okay, we have this guy playing bad. Now we got to send him with him because he's just not quite ready for this moment. And I think that can lead to challenges when guys aren't comfortable playing with each other. I think you get more comfortable playing with the same ball, the same guy. I think that's all factors that are so important of why getting off to a fast start in these Ryder Cups is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of those things too, where you're like, golly, when we started talking about this, there's a month and a half, now it's about a month until the Ryder Cup. Like, surely we can't, we're going to exhaust ourselves talking about the Ryder Cup every week until then, but it's not. There's always something new to talk about, a new angle. And I think I read somewhere that the Team USA is heading over. I think by when you're listening to this, they will be at Marco Simone playing some practice rounds through the end of the weekend. And then I think Team Europe scheduled to arrive on Monday. So that'll be a whole nother, wrinkle of, guys getting a look at the course and kind of getting a feel for it for the first time. And how does that change potential pairings, the way you're going to play it? So
it's a long build up because, you feel like Ryder Cup week takes so long to get to Friday because they get there and you start seeing videos surface on like Sunday or Monday. And you're like, get me to Friday. This is going to be the longest week of my life. And
it's like the 2 weeks between the Super Bowl and like the championship games where you're like, we got to do a media day and all this stuff.
I get so excited about team events, man. I think it's so fun to watch these guys, play for their, US or Europe, whatever it is. And it's just so fascinating to watch it, how passionate these guys are. And it all stems from, the guys that played before them, just the standard that's set as far as, what it meant to these players. And I feel like this generation's really embraced it. And it's something that every single one of these players want to be a part of.
Well, and here's another thing. This is slightly off topic, but I think it's really interesting this specific year is the new wave of fans coming to golf.
Yeah.
Especially through vehicles like Full Swing. Like, and this is very anecdotal, but like my wife was watching our Team USA picks live stream on YouTube, right?
Apologies.
And
apologies to the chat room.
Amanda, really sorry about the chat. Please disregard the last 20 minutes of that stream. But she, I came downstairs after and she's like, I'm so fired up to watch the Ryder Cup now. Like, I mean, she literally, she'll watch kind of the Sundays of the majors with me. And if it's on, it's on. But I mean, I think there are going to be a lot of people like Amanda that are kind of casuals, watch full swing, maybe have some sort of human interest connection to various players, but are just listening to this whole build up and the drama involved in this, and that it feels like a big football game or something,
Right.
that's similar to that, and are going to be tuned. Like I would not be shocked if I should say this, like it's a real shame this isn't an American Ryder Cup, because the TV windows are going to kind of suck for Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Fine with me,
early. You're going to be over there, so it's not going to bother you. But
just fine with me.
I would actually be curious to look at the TV ratings compared to other, Ryder Cups on foreign soil, because I just feel like the interest there is going to be pretty huge this year.
Oh,
so
it's going to be massive. It's going to be amazing. And you typically ask most of the questions around here, and I'm going to ask you a question to get your opinion. And I'll probably come back and also have an answer and opinion. But I want you to tell me who you think is going to be the most important pick of the guys that were picked on the European team and the players that were picked on the United States team. And I guess most important, I would say, who wins the most amount of points out of those six?
That's such a good question. I
guess you got to lean into who you think will play more. Would be the first thing you do. It's like, who's going to go out and play at least 4 matches, because that gives you the best chance, obviously, to earn more points.
Yeah, I think we'd probably both agree here. Like, the obvious choice on the American side would be JT, because I think you and I are aligned here. Like, we think he is going to be. I think he's going to show up and he's going to crush it like he always does. I will not go in that direction, because I think Sam Burns is going to be so crucial.
That was the pick,
team.
Man. I think that's the right pick.
So crucial.
I think it's the right pick.
We heard Freddie Couples talking about how, as part of their decision-making process, Scotty Scheffler reached out to the captains and the vice captains, and they were like, and he was saying basically, Sam carried me at the President's Cup. This is something you've said a number of times on this podcast. You were there covering the President's Cup and watching them and saying Sam Burns played really good golf all week long. If this was a 4-day tournament, Sam Burns might have won the thing. And so I think that a guy like that, I think we're going to see. I mean, even if what we're actually watching on TV is Scotty going out and playing brilliant golf and actually making putts again, I think so much of that's going to be a result of Sam being there as his partner. That's kind of gives him some sort of comfort and confidence. That would be on the Team USA side, and then on the Europe side, from a picks perspective, I think this is going to be the Ludvig Aberg coming out party. And I'm not the first to say this or anything, but I really and truly think he's incredibly talented. He seems to have a really good head on his shoulders. I mean, I think Sepp Straka is going to do really well, playing his first Ryder Cup. But I think that Ludvig, for me, really, I feel like we're in the same way that we watched Scotty do it at Whistling Straits. We're going to look back on this and be like, oh yeah, like this was the springboard, and now he's one of the best 20, 15, 10 players in the world. And it's just kind of it's a commonly held belief. It's not even crazy to think about that. When looking back, it's like that would be a stretch.
And so, any other guys that stand out on either side before I kind of get into my take on that?
You're talking about the captain's pick side, or just the entire
captain's
team?
Picks. Captain's picks.
Well, I would say, I gave you 2 on, but I really do think Sepp Straka is primed for when Sepp Straka gets hot, Sepp Straka gets hot.
Yeah. And
if everything aligns for him this week, I think anyone you played him against in a singles format or a 4-ball or foursomes, he is going to be a dangerous proposition on the Team Europe side.
He plays a Srixon ball. And
interesting. Okay.
I play Srixon ball as well, so I don't think it's that difficult to play.
I play Srixon ball as well. So
yeah. But when you look at, I do think it means something to try to figure out who fits the category of playing that golf ball, or just a different golf ball than they're accustomed to playing. But from a shot shape standpoint, Rory McIlroy makes a whole lot of sense with Sepp. And they both hit draws. They both play fast, and I think, balance each other out nicely. I think those two would be really nice pairing together. I don't know if that'll actually happen. I think Rory, to me, I see him pairing more with somebody like a friend like Shane Lowry, or pairing with a Tyrrell Hatton. Those are two that kind of stand out to me. But Sepp is going to end up with one of those top guys. I just don't know exactly who it's going to be. But I would like to see him play a match with Rory because I think they really complement each other nice.
I love that. I think, because we're talking
about
two
so
drawers of the
straight.
goal. Yeah.
Drives it so straight, which is why I think he would be so good in the alternate shot stuff. But a lot of times they rely on experience in those formats, and they send out it's a little bit more players that have played in those formats before.
Well, and this is really where you could see, if we're looking at the Team Europe backroom staff, and our concern is that there aren't as many vocal presences there. The positive they could potentially bring to you is, especially with a guy like Eduardo Molinari back there, with all the data he crunches and the way he does that, like for current guys on tour. So he is up to date there. He could add a ton of value, and Luke Donald could add a ton of value by crafting partnerships that we may not be obvious to us, but to them are like these two are going to succeed. So I think that's where they could add a ton of value. Now I'd flip this back to you. So who are your guys who are identifying as high impact captain's picks?
I don't disagree with you on the Europe side. I think Aberg would be a guy that I would see having a really highly successful week. And the only thing I kind of think about when it comes to Ludvig Aberg, to me, he reminds me a lot of Thomas Pieters. Similar height, similar abilities. Thomas Pieters was picked as a captain's pick in, I think it was 2016 Ryder Cup. And he didn't exactly light the world on fire in that Ryder Cup. He hit a lot of great shots that you were like, wow, this guy's going to be an all-star for years to come. And that didn't necessarily live up to that. Some of those shots he hit in the Ryder Cup where we saw that, we're like, man, this guy's going to be insane. I need to check out Thomas Pieters' Ryder Cup record from that particular one. But he would be a guy that compares to Ludwig in that, to where they're like very newcomers and players that you expect high things of. But I would say, to me, I think Matthew Fitzpatrick, and I believe he was a pick, correct?
Matt, you're talking about for this year? He actually he was well, they haven't even updated the picks website, but that second place finish at the Omega European Masters got him in as the last pick.
Okay.
And
I'd had him as a pick this whole time. It just
flipped him with Fleetwood, where Fleetwood then became the pick, but they were essentially neck and neck. Yeah.
Then obviously I take Fleetwood because I know he's going to play the most, and he's probably going to play with Victor. So I'm going to take Fleetwood there. I'm most encouraged by what I think. I would say the most player with the most upside is 100% Sepp. I think the player that the Europeans need to play is a combination tie for me between Fitzpatrick and Hatton. Like, one of those two guys have got to be a stalwart for you. If you have both of those guys play bad, I think Europe gets beat.
Yeah,
because
I think
those two guys can beat any of the players on the United States. All these guys could beat anybody, but I think those two guys pair the best with everybody on the European team and have the game and experience to be able to take down a Xander Cantlay pairing.
I really regret to inform you of something about the 2016 Ryder Cup. Thomas Pieters, in the 5 matches he played, went 4-1-0.
What it was. Okay.
So
it was,
but I mean,
it was either one way or the other. It was something like, because you saw me change my beat there at the end. I was like, wait, in my back of my head, I was like, hold on. I have this shot that he hit on like the 16th hole.
I mean, he was the best player on the team by record.
Okay.
Which
so
he won 4 points. But I mean, I think it strengthens your argument of a guy that's a newcomer like Ludvig Aberg. And
he reminded me of him. He reminded me of him. And I wish I would have, that, like, as I was kind of going on about this bit about, I question whether if he'll be able to answer to it, but then halfway through, I'm like, hold on, I'm starting to remember these shots that Thomas Pieters were hitting. And then by the end of the week, I'm like, oh my God, Thomas Pieters is going to be a top player forever. And so sorry for doing a total 180 in the middle of that bit, but hey, at least I thought of the comparison.
We got there. Yeah,
it's a
exactly.
Big comparison.
It's actually one that I would not have even thought of. And then in looking at the kind of looking back at that 2016 Ryder Cup, I'm like, man, I would say it this way: if Ludvig goes out and goes 4-1-0, oh boy, the tour is on notice for next season. I mean, that would be a heck of. I mean, first of all, if Ludvig plays 5 sessions, which I don't think that's going to happen, but I mean, still, it's if he plays 4 sessions and he goes 3-1-0. I mean, I think that's really could be a Kickstarter. So,
well, look at that last Ryder Cup at Whistling Straits. I think Matthew Fitzpatrick only played 3 times. I think he was 0-3. And I think you have you have to get something out of him because he's one of the best putters on this team. And the more matches he plays, I think the better their team gets.
Well, what's interesting too, to kind of go back to what we're talking about here in terms of how this whole thing plays out. Like if Europe gets punched in the mouth early and maybe, just Friday in general, or maybe after that first session. And I wonder how quickly they hit the panic button. It's like,
all right, that top 8.
No, reverse. Like if you come in and you're playing like a Fitzpatrick who had a poor showing at Whistling Straits, or any of those guys hadn't, and they lose their first match in bad fashion. It's like, all right, Ludvig, Nikolai, you're up. Let's see what you can do. And
that's
like
the worst recipe to me.
Then it's like,
it's such a bad recipe for me. I really think it'd be smart to get those guys out early, because then, like you said, then you're almost guaranteed to be down like 6-2 going into day 2. If you have a bad morning session with experienced guys, then you throw out the inexperience in the afternoon against the similar teams that play in the morning for the US team. You're like, how are these guys going to go take these guys down? But I think there's just so much from this Europe team to talk about. The US team, to me, it's more about just like, what are the pods going to be? Because I guess I'll answer kind of my question on that side real quick. I think the US team, I'm going to go different from Burns and JT. I'm going to go Brooks. Oh no, did Brooks get in? No, he got out. Brooks was a pick.
Brooks was 7.
I'm going to go with Brooks. Yeah. Brooks is my pick. I think he potentially could have the most points in the Ryder Cup from the U.S. side. He could be the best player for the U.S. side. Might play 5 matches for the U.S. side, depending on how well he's playing. I doubt he does, just with his just injuries he's had in the past. I don't see 5 out of him, but he easily could go 4-0. That's for dang sure.
I think that's a great call. I think Brooks, to me, is like a make or break guy in my mind, like where it's like he either, if he goes out and has a strong first couple sessions, it's like, got it. Like this guy's one of our rocks, especially
when you're going against the top of, you're like, all right, we have a guy that we can go up against Victor and feel comfortable about. Like Brooks has already done it at the PGA this year. Let's see if he can do it on single Sunday at the Ryder Cup.
100%, especially as we talk about how the top half, or the top even third of that Team Europe roster is so stacked with Rory, Rahm, and Victor. Just that. And this is, again, we've said this a number of times, no disrespect to a guy like Wyndham Clark or Brian Harman, who were, some of our highest qualifiers, but those are guys that just don't have experience. And so, it's while there's a ton of depth on the Team USA side, it is the quality at the top the same as Team Europe? Maybe not. So if a guy like Brooks, who was a pick, plays like a number 2 or a number 3, because that's the other thing too. And Scotty said this, I think, in the press conference, one of the playoff events, of like, if you look at the earnings that, how little Brooks missed an automatic qualification spot by versus how few events he played.
Stupid.
Like the points earned per event is insane. He's right there with Scotty. So if he plays like that guy, then Team USA is in a really good spot and has another rock. So I think that's a great call.
I think he's going to be motivated too. I think it's just another way for, Brooks. He's a big time player, man. He gets up for big events. He gets up for the majors. And I think for the longest time, the opinion of media and other people around golf was that Tiger Woods just didn't really care about the Ryder. Like he just didn't really get up for this as much as he did for a major. And I think Brooks Koepka is an adrenaline junkie. I think he just lives for other people to get uncomfortable and him to be like, you know what? Like he laughs at people that can't handle the situation. And I think that's what Brooks plays towards. And I think that's why he's going to be so successful.
It's like, have you ever seen the movie Point Break?
Nah. Seen it all the time. Like I always slide
Oh
right
my.
past it on the Delta flight or wherever I am. Like, I don't know.
Well, that's probably the new one, to be fair. That's not like the Patrick Swayze, Keanu Reeves one, which is a much better film for anyone out there who hasn't seen it.
I don't think I've seen it.
But for the people out there who have seen it, like Brooks Koepka's like golf Bodie, like just total adrenaline junkie. Like I need the big wave, I need the big event. Like let's go out there and get it. So I totally agree with you. I think I want to also get in the notes here. Walker Cup recap.
Absolutely.
Furious rally from.
We both watched it, didn't we?
I was traveling, but I mean, this is one of my favorite events. I was at the Walker Cup at Seminole a few years back. One of my favorite sporting events, full stop, that I've ever been to. Super pumped for the next Ryder Cup. The next Walker Cup at Cypress Point. But big rally on Sunday from Team USA to win 14.5 to 11.5,
which was surprising. And they were heavy favorites.
They definitely were. I think there's a whole other spin-off debate you can have on this, which is like, why are we still doing this iteration of the competition? Like, no disrespect to the guys from GB and I are going out there and giving their best and honestly kept it close for the first part of it. But why are we not just mirroring the Ryder Cup format and allowing all those juniors who were, European players who could be a part of this and add some juice to it to be involved? I think that's a much more interesting competition, in my opinion.
Wait, what are you saying? Like, what's your issue?
Just that the Walker Cup right now is all of America against Great Britain and Ireland. I mean, that just doesn't really feel very.
Oh, it's not all of Europe, is what you're saying.
It's not all of Europe, yeah.
Gotcha.
And it's the same deal with the Curtis Cup on the ladies' side versus the Solheim Cup, and I just don't understand. I know that there are like world amateur competitions and things like that incorporate, other European countries, but it just would make a lot of sense to me. Especially, we all love the Ryder Cup. It's a known entity. It's a product that we all look forward to. I mean, we're here. We've talked for an hour about the Ryder Cup. Like, if you had the same sort of juice on the junior side, I still love the Walker Cup and I get excited to watch it. But I just think a more competitive product would pull in more eyeballs, and that's why this Walker Cup was a really interesting one. That it was kind of close, and you were wondering, can they get the job done? But then they go out on Sunday. Oh, it'd be huge. I mean, the all-time record, I think it's like 39-9 or something like that. I just I wanted to talk about. I mean, the whole team was phenomenal, but Gordon Sargent goes 4-0. He now has 19 of the 20 points he needs to earn a tour card at the end of the 2023-24 season through the PGA Tour Euro Accelerated program. And if he just shows up and plays in the World Amateur in October, that is his 20th point. He will have his card locked up. I mean, what a phenomenal. I was looking at that accelerated list, and the second, the guy in second is Nick Dunlap with 8 points now. Now Nick's a class behind Gordon, but just what a phenomenal amateur career that Gordon's had. And I that's another guy where you're looking at like the way Ludvig's played coming off the regular PGA Tour Euro program. I cannot wait to see Gordon full-time on tour.
Listen, he's going to be one of those United States players that we're going to be that we just talked about the last 30 minutes talking about the Ryder Cup. Gordon will eventually be there, and the reason why it's just, it's just drop dead talent. It's just
superpowers.
So talented. And I still think the crazy thing about Gordon is I don't think he's all the way there yet. And that's the beauty of how good Gordon is right now, is that I still think there's plenty more to improve on. I think he could continue to get better with off-speed stuff. I think he could get better with having another gear off the tee and then just, keep sharpening up the rest of the game. Like at the Masters this year, didn't necessarily pitch it very well. So and we're judging a guy whose first professional golf tournament was at the Masters, and he was the most hyped amateur since Bryson DeChambeau, since that's walked the grounds at Augusta. So we're going to give him a little break on that. And I personally think that he can continue to just sharpen up just those little feel shots with irons, have a little go-to shot off the tee. Dude, the sky is going to be the limit for this kid. And got to watch the Walker Cup and watch Gordon, and him and Nick Dunlap did play together, which I was excited to see.
Birmingham boys.
I was hoping they play together really all week. I thought that made a lot of sense to me, just to send those two out. It's like, hey, if you beat those two guys, like, congrats.
Right.
So they got a win together and to me, most of Gordon's wins this week were later on. And I think Gordon's still learning how to play match play. Like, I don't think he's necessarily the best match play player as he is stroke play player, because I think he is a guy that feels he can beat a guy over 72 holes versus like a match play. I think he gets concerned about running into a hot putter, or like, how do I, do I play really aggressive? And where we talked about to Nick Dunlap, we had him on the podcast, and I thought he was like beyond his years as far as understanding match play and how to win matches. And it is an art to winning matches in match play. You can go out and you could play aggressive and have 7 birdies and win 6 and 5. Or you take the approach like Nick Dunlap and say, you know what, I'm going to play exactly the same way I would play, and I'm not going to let that player determine the shots I hit. And if you beat me by the end, I'll shake your hand. And I think kind of Gordon's kind of stuck in between there a little bit in match play. But this week, all of his matches got towards like the back half, like 16, 17, 18. He was able to make big putts every single time I seemingly opened my phone, like towards the end of their sessions, he was making a big putt from like 8 to 10 feet. So I think that's super important for Gordon to have more moments like that so you can draw on. It's like, I've made an 8-footer at the Walker Cup to win my match. And that's something that guys draw on when we talk about, Scotty Scheffler at the Ryder Cup, when we talk about John Rahm beating Tiger Woods at the Ryder Cup. Like these are all things that these players get in an early age, and which is why Gordon's 4-0 record at an on the road Ryder Cup is so impressive.
Yeah, I think it's a scary reality of how good Gordon could be. I mean, we heard a couple months ago, Adam Scott, before the Open Championship, before the Scottish Open, talking about just marveling at Gordon's ball speed, just effortless ball speed at that age. And so, you have that as your superpower. And if you can start kind of filling out the kind of feel on the short game, the wedge shots and the clutch putting, like you're talking about, making those 8-10 footers coming down the stretch, then you're really talking about a guy that is a scary proposition in stroke play and in match play. So really cool to see him play well. Excited to see him on tour full time, and just wanted to kind of get that Walker Cup in the notes. So we're almost out of time here, but you know what? I'm looking at my clock, Smylie. I think we have just enough time to talk about North Carolina beating South Carolina to open the season, and of course whatever LSU did in their opener. You might have to refresh my memory there. I
got to watch
would you like to make a statement on behalf of the LSU Tigers and Brian Kelly and the university? What's just give us like give us the statement that you'd like to make on the loss to Florida State.
Just from like watching the game and everything I've seen after, we're just soft, and that I've never seen an LSU team get out-swaggered, outplayed, and out-coached all in a span of 45 minutes in the second half. And and that's kind of what we were built on, like when even the Les Miles years, we were like the offense was just so ancient, but we find a way to coach you, out-heart you, and have more swagger than you. And you knew that when the team got off the bus. And there were times in the game where like Jaden Daniels got totally speared on this play.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a penalty. It just was something that normally our offensive lineman would have gotten in a fight. Like we would have gotten in a fight in years past. And there was another play on the sideline where one of our players running out of bounds, and he slides all the way into where the guys sit, which is, 10, 15 yards off, where most of the time, if on the opposing bench, it starts something like everybody crowds around and it's just like, hey, you're in the wrong place for the wrong time. So that I just don't see. And then now there's rumors that always come out after that you don't know are true or not, that Brian Kelly doesn't allow music to be played in the locker room. And I'm like, God, like now they don't get to listen to the music. So my, I guess to put it as short as I can is like, we need to get our swagger back.
Well, you know what? I absolutely agree with all that from the standpoint of like, look, I get that Brian Kelly is a great college football coach that has a win-loss record that's right up there with all the greats all time. He did a lot of great stuff at Notre Dame, did a lot of great stuff at Cincinnati. Like guy knows how to coach college football.
Got to adapt to what you got,
Well, that having been said, this one always felt like a weird fit to me. Like, I mean, the problem is there's never been a more perfect coach for LSU than Coach O. So it's a really hard act to follow up. And you know, for all of Coach O's faults, he got it. He got what it meant to be an LSU guy and all that, all the things you're talking about, swagger and all that sort of stuff. So with Kelly, like ever since that first being introduced at the basketball game where he was faking a Cajun accent and all that sort of stuff, it's like, I'm not saying he's not good at coaching college football players, just maybe not this group of college football players.
We'll see. We'll see. And I do think that it's an overreaction big time right now. I think when you look at that game, and especially the first half, I think there were times like everybody says, "Oh, we were dominated in the trenches." Like, dude, they couldn't block us for a while in that game, and what ended up being the case was their wide receivers were just elite, and we couldn't cover them, and that was I think the biggest factor in the game. And I think Jordan Travis played one hell of a game, and we made it too easy on him at times. I thought we played too passive, and but anyways, I don't want to get too into breaking down LSU football, but the only thing I'll leave you with on Brian Kelly is look at the other three options that we were looking at, and we 1,000% got the right guy at the time.
Who were those two guys in the mix?
It was Billy Napier, who's at Florida, who's already on the chopping block.
Yep.
Dave Aranda, who just lost to Texas State week 1, and then Mel Tucker at Michigan State, who's that program went from being like the Keon Coleman who we saw on the sidelines for Florida State, and Peyton Thornton at Auburn. Yeah, those guys were at Michigan State. They're not there anymore. So I think we ended up with the right guy. It's just the right guy at the time. Could there have been guys that came up a year later that would have been a better fit? Probably. But right now, I mean, we're going to have to figure out how to adapt to LSU and back to what this program was kind of built on.
Yeah, we did a fun like foreign exchange program sort of thing this week where like you got an ACC team and I got an SEC team. And I will say, just to kind of put a bow on your game, I am scared shitless of the Florida State Seminoles. I mean, good God, that looks like a buzzsaw.
Good, man.
I don't, especially after watching Clemson lose to Duke. They are clearly the favorite in the conference, and it's going to go through them. I'll you know,
where do y'all play them?
We don't play them this year, which is great. But it means we would theoretically, if we have a good enough season, we play them. And it's interesting this year. It's the first year without divisions. We got rid of the Atlantic and the Coastal Division, so it's just the two best records in the ACC that make it to the title.
Would y'all normally play them every year?
No, because they were Atlantic.
In the other division.
Yeah, okay. we were Coastal. We were, just for the record, the last Coastal champs ever of all time. No one can take that from us.
Which coast? Sorry, I'm getting confused of which coast.
I guess
is it the West Coast or East Coast?
You could grandfather that coast in too, because now we have, of course, Stanford, Cal, and SMU. You can even the Gulf Coast as well with SMU.
Did you see Michael Kim's tweet, by the way? I mean, how uneducated was that tweet?
I tried to get in on it. So you guys want to talk about Mac Brown 2.0? No one took me up on it. I was really sad about that.
I listen, Michael knows a bunch about golf, but that was as bad of a take as I've ever, like, there wasn't even an argument to be had.
You came back at him pretty hard, which I loved. I was like, oh, yeah. But I was like,
if you're going to talk ball, like, let's talk ball, like, but let's not have uninformed opinions, because it was a bad opinion.
Yeah, I think I get what he was trying to put together, and I never try to fault people for workshopping ideas, but every once in a while you workshop an idea that's so bad you get smacked. Yeah.
He had like the most 10-win seasons in a row or something of like all time, and we're gonna say Ed Orgeron was a comparison to that. It's like, no, this is
yeah. I mean, I think what's happening to Dabo is a totally different thing where
NIL,
NIL. And I think, listen, like, it's good to have a shtick, you know, it's when a brand becomes a shtick. Like, when it's working, it's a brand, it's a culture, everyone's behind it. Then after a little while, it hits a tipping point, and then it's a shtick. Everyone's tired of it. And I think that with Clemson, it's a little bit of, I think the whole Dabo deal is wearing thin on some people. And also, to be fair to him, he lost his coordinators. He lost, Brent Venables to Oklahoma. He lost Tony Elliott to Virginia.
But that's why they were so good for so long, is that you had the same coaches, same system. Like, and that's where, like, Edo was, like, he nailed a couple hires, but some people are great at hiring people,
Well,
and trying to get them to do it their way, to have, their hand in the pot on everything.
It's such a tough thing. I think, especially at the college football level, because it's like if you're so much of it is it's a trade off. It's like you're gaining a thing, but you're losing a thing. So I'll give you an example from North Carolina football. Dre Bly came in with Mac early on and was one of the best recruiters in the history of the program. Was landing all these Virginia Beach kids, was phenomenal. Dre, I love you. I had a poster of you up on my wall when I was a kid as a Rams fan.
But let me guess, not a good coach.
One of the worst position coaches of all time. I mean, like they literally his last year, he was like the defensive backs coach, and they hired a secondary coach in on top of him because they needed more coaching on that side. So like
some guys are great recruiters that just aren't good coaches.
And it's okay, but it's just you have to. I think that's part of like you have to figure out how to put the whole puzzle together. How am I going to get it all in and make it work? And I think that no matter how good you are, with Dabo, there's expiration dates on everything. And I just think that's kind of what's happening there. But I think that, I mean, dude, Florida State looks like a juggernaut. I'm scared to death of them. But I will say, as bad as South Carolina looked on both, especially the offensive line side, but also the defensive line side a little bit, like I am encouraged by the North Carolina Tar Heels this year, by our squad, because our defense.
Defense looked good.
They're like,
really
hey,
football.
We're going to play this year. We're going to play this year.
We just don't know how bad the South Carolina offensive line is. And if that offensive line turns out to be just the worst in the SEC, but let's say they turn out to be like I don't see a scenario that they're like anything lower than 10th, but let's say they were like 7, 8, 9. Then it's like, wait, maybe North Carolina's defensive line and defense is really good. But that's it's this classic overreactions after a week one every single time. And not to remind you that we've lost 4 straight openers. So I'm really glad that we have a really easy opener next year as we open in Las Vegas against USC. It's like, sweet. We do it all over again.
Wow. I think, I mean, if you're going to lose a game, lose the first one. And if you're going to lose a game, if you're going to lose your first game, lose against a really good team that's highly ranked, it's going to stay highly ranked, because then it's not going to reflect as poorly on you. So I think
we scored a touchdown late, which didn't help.
That was good.
Made it look like a little. I mean, I think everybody's going to remember the beatdown, but maybe
it was getting a little blowouty for a second. I was like, ooh, that touchdown's probably good for them. 45-24 looks a lot less bad than 45-17.
It was 17-14 and a half us, and then it just crazy. And then I think one team forgot to show up for the second half, and that was us.
I'll say on Carolina's piece too, like there were a bunch of games lost at the end of last season when Drake had an off game that just because our defense was just not very good, that we just kind of gave it away. He threw 2 picks, and it's like this Heisman campaign started a little bit on shaky ground, but to still win by a 2 touchdown margin, that encourages me. On the North Carolina side of things, like, okay, if the defense can play just good enough to give us a chance, no matter, like, as long as Drake plays okay, we should win some games. Then that's our little college football wrap for this show. Also worth mentioning, how about Deion Sanders winning his first game? That was interesting, over TCU as a 3 touchdown dog. We got Texas Bama this weekend. Bama 7-point favorite at home. You're getting a lot more flavor of college football the rest of the season. But I think that's it, Smylie. Do you have any kind of parting thoughts for the audience as we head into kind of more Ryder Cup preview off season and we have coming up next couple weeks?
Yeah, not a ton. Just maybe try to play a little golf this weekend, but I'm gonna get the smoker going and maybe cook something real good. So hopefully I can get some pictures of that and have that for us to take a peek at next time we're on.
Love a good smoker pick. I have an overdue Marion review for you that I'm dying to tell you about on the pod. We'll do that soon. But that's all for this week. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.